When we think about history, our minds usually jump to things like cities, writing, maybe some big empires. But what if I told you that the single most important thing that ever happened in human history happened way before any of that? It's a revolution that, for better or for worse, literally created the world we live in today. So let's dive into the Neolithic Revolution and see how a simple decision to plant a few seeds completely rewrote the human story. Okay, so our story kicks off right here with a planet that was totally in chaos. About 12,000 years ago, the last ice age didn't just end. It came to a crashing, dramatic halt. As you can see from this data, temperatures shot up incredibly fast. Now, for the hunter-gatherers living back then, this was no gentle spring thaw. This was a full-blown catastrophe. Sea levels were rising, flooding lands their families had lived on for generations, and putting unbelievable pressure on the survivors. So just put yourself in their shoes for a second. The world you know is literally disappearing under your feet. The food is getting scarce, and there are more and more people competing for less and less land. What do you do? I mean, this was the critical question facing all of humanity. And the answer they came up with would echo down through all of history. It was something brand new. Agriculture. For people who were right on the brink, farming must have looked like a miracle, a way to create food, not just hope you could find it. And the change was, well, it was total. Hunter-gatherers, they were mobile, lived in small groups that were pretty equal, and they ate all sorts of different things. Farming flipped every single one of those things on its head. It meant staying put, which led to way bigger populations. It meant relying on just a handful of staple crops, and, this is a big one, it marked the beginning of social hierarchy. It was a fundamentally different way of being human. So where did this all start? Well, it began with just watching. People started noticing that certain wild plants, like these wild grasses, the great-great-grandparents of wheat and barley, were an amazing source of calories. So the very first step wasn't even planting. It was just figuring out how to harvest these wild plants more and more effectively. And that new efficiency, it needed new tech. This right here is a Neolithic sickle blade. For the very first time, people were making specialized tools, not for hunting, but for harvesting plants. This little piece of flint might not look like much, but it represents a massive leap forward in how people thought. But, harvesting was only half the job. You couldn't just munch on these grains right off the stalk. Nope. They had to be processed, ground into flour with tools like this grindstone, and this was tough, backbreaking, repetitive work. It meant that this new, reliable food source came at a cost, a whole lot more labor. So, you see, this new lifestyle wasn't just about farming. It was a whole bundle of changes that came together, something archaeologists call the Neolithic package. And just like any package deal, it came with some incredible benefits, but also some really serious hidden costs. Right, so when a society went all in on agriculture, they didn't just get a new menu. They basically got a whole new operating system for life. This package included everything: permanent villages, brand new tools, a massive population boom, and completely new ways of organizing people. And this just perfectly shows the paradox at the heart of this whole revolution. On the one hand, yeah, you get food surpluses and populations can explode. But on the other hand, the evidence is pretty clear. Early farmers often had worse nutrition. New diseases started jumping from their livestock to them. And for the first time in human history, society started splitting into the haves and the have-nots. See, that ability to store extra food meant someone could control it, creating wealth for a few and making a lot of other people dependent on them. This really nails the great trade-off, doesn't it? Agriculture let communities produce a huge quantity of calories, way more than enough to feed these new growing villages. But the quality of what they were eating, it plummeted compared to the very diet of a hunter-gatherer. So you could feed more people, sure, but those people were often a lot less healthy. Okay, so for the longest time, the story we told ourselves was simple. First came farming, then people settled down, and then, finally, you got complex society. But what if we've had it completely backwards this whole time? What if politics actually came before the plow? This is a really fascinating and honestly a kind of disruptive idea. It suggests that our ancestors had to figure out the political problem first. They had to learn how to cooperate on a massive scale before they could even think about trying something as complicated as agriculture. All right, prepare to have your mind blown. This is Göbekli Tepe in what's now Turkey. And it doesn't just bend the rules of history, it absolutely shatters them. These unbelievable monuments, they were built over 11,000 years ago. That's thousands of years before we see any evidence of farming in the area. The sheer size of this place proves that hunter-gatherers were already organizing huge numbers of people for incredibly complex projects. And this quote right here, it gets to the very heart of this new theory. The hardest thing for humans isn't figuring out how to grow wheat or tame a sheep. The hardest thing is learning how to work with strangers without, killing each other. Göbekli Tepe suggests that our ancestors solved this huge political problem first, creating the social framework that made the agricultural revolution even possible. Now, it's really easy to get focused on the Fertile Crescent, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. To really get the whole story, we have to zoom out. Because the Neolithic Revolution wasn't just one event, it was a global transformation that popped up independently all over the world. I mean, look at this map. It's just incredible. It shows at least 7 different places where people invented farming all on their own, just using whatever local plants and animals they had around them. From the Fertile Crescent to China, New Guinea, Mesoamerica, and North America, people all across the planet arrived at the same basic solution to the same post-Ice Age problems. So let's zoom in on East Asia, because it's a fantastic example. We're not talking about one invention here, but 2. Up north, along the Yellow River, farmers figured out how to grow millet. But way down south, a totally different culture along the Yangtze River unlocked the secrets of rice. And this rice farming package didn't just build new societies, it launched one of the most amazing migrations in human history, the Austronesian expansion. Powered by this reliable food source, these farmers and sailors went on to populate the islands of the Pacific, from Taiwan all the way to Easter Island, and even sailed to Madagascar off the coast of Africa. And as you can see from this timeline, these revolutions happened at totally different times all over the planet. It kicks off in the Fertile Crescent about 11,000 years ago with wheat and barley. Then, around 9,000 years ago, you see it happen in China with rice and millet, and at the exact same time in New Guinea with taro and bananas. And then you have to wait another 4,000 years before maize shows up in Mesoamerica, and after that, sunflowers in North America. Each one was its own unique event. So, after all this, what's the verdict? Was it a good thing? Was it a good thing? Some historians have famously called agriculture humanity's biggest mistake, arguing it just led to disease, inequality, and misery. Is that true? Or was it the necessary step that led to everything we call civilization? The truth is, the picture is incredibly complicated. The pros? They're undeniable. Food surpluses led to huge population growth and allowed for specialized jobs. People could become artists, scientists, engineers. But the cons are just as stark. Poorer health, a rise in disease, deep social inequality, and the beginning of us damaging the environment on a massive scale. In the end, the Neolithic Revolution wasn't just good or bad. It was the event that created the world we all live in. It's the origin story for our greatest triumphs, sure, but also for our most stubborn problems, from social injustice to the climate crisis. And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. 12,000 years ago, our ancestors made a bargain. They traded the mobile freedom of the hunter-gatherer for the food security of the farmer. It's a trade-off that has defined human history ever since. And the real question for us is, are we still living with the consequences and paying the price of that ancient choice today?